The world had known nothing but peace for 3,000 years. The sounds of war, once a part of everyday life, were nothing but distant memories. Cities were alive with growth and prosperity, the streets full of people going about their daily lives, working, laughing, and living without fear. The Earth had become a thriving hub of culture, science, and innovation. Across the globe, the warlike tendencies that had once defined humanity seemed like a thing of the past. The human race had become an example of what was possible when conflict was set aside for the greater good. Science and exploration had flourished as humanity looked to the stars, seeking answers to questions about the universe that had plagued them for centuries. But even in the midst of this long period of calm, there was something in the air, a feeling that something was waiting, hidden just out of sight. The peaceful hum of daily life carried on, but there were whispers among the world's greatest minds, among the politicians and the scientists, who couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. In the quiet of their laboratories, in the silence of their observatories, a few had started to notice strange things. Signals that came from deep space, signals that seemed deliberate. At first, no one paid them much mind. After all, humans had been reaching into space for so long, it seemed impossible that something or someone out there could be trying to communicate. But the signals persisted. And not just that, they were getting stronger. There was a rhythm to them, an unmistakable pattern that couldn't be ignored. One night, as the sky shimmered under a blanket of stars, a signal was received that no one could dismiss. It wasn't like anything the world had ever encountered. It wasn't a simple radio transmission or an erratic burst of energy from the stars. No, this was something far more purposeful, far more dangerous. The message was clear, concise, and it sent a chill through the hearts of all who heard it. The peace is over. Prepare for war. The words echoed in the minds of everyone who heard them, lingering like a dark cloud. The message wasn't a request or a plea. It was an order. As the words reverberated through humanity's collective consciousness, disbelief turned into fear, then quickly into confusion. The peaceful world that had known nothing but harmony for millennia was now confronted with the unimaginable. How could this be? The people of Earth had not prepared for war in so long. They had not built weapons of mass destruction or armies. They had not trained soldiers to fight and die. They had not needed to. There was no enemy, no threat, until now. The implications were terrifying. Who were these strangers? And why now, after 3,000 years of peace? In every corner of the Earth, people stared up at the sky. From the tallest skyscrapers to the quietest villages, eyes turned to the heavens, scanning for something, anything that would explain the message. What could it mean? Was it a threat or a warning? Was this the start of something worse? News channels across the globe began to report the strange signal, broadcasting it in every language, making it clear to all that the time of peace had ended. Governments scrambled to respond, to understand what was happening. Scientists and military leaders alike were in disbelief, but they knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary event. The people of Earth were no longer alone in the universe, and worse, the peace they had fought so hard to build could be about to crumble. In the days that followed, there was a sense of surreal tension. Ordinary people tried to go about their daily lives, but the air felt thick with anxiety. The streets seemed quieter, the sky more distant. People tried to hold on to their sense of normalcy, but everywhere they looked, there were signs of something changing. Even the children felt it. They whispered about the stars and the strange new sounds they could hear in the night. People gathered around radios and televisions, waiting for answers. Everyone was asking the same question. What did this mean for them? What was coming next? For those who had lived through the Great War that had torn the world apart centuries before, the feeling was all too familiar. They remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the loss. It was a dark chapter in human history that they had hoped would never return. But now, with the message from the stars still fresh in their minds, it seemed as if that chapter was being reopened. This time, though, the threat was unknown. The weapons of humanity were not ready. The defenses were not prepared. Among the most anxious were the leaders of the world. They met in secret, discussing what steps to take. Should they prepare for an invasion? Should they try to communicate with whoever had sent the message? Was it even possible to make contact? There was no playbook for this. The world had never experienced a threat like this. The war that humanity had once feared was no longer a distant possibility. It was real, and it was happening. Still, no one knew where the aliens were or when they would arrive. The message had been sent, but it was not clear when or how the war would begin. People speculated. Some feared an immediate invasion. Others worried that the aliens might simply wait, observe, and strike when humanity least expected it. There was no guarantee that the peaceful world they had built over 3 millennia would survive whatever was coming. In the midst of all this fear, there was a small group of people who believed that humanity could rise to the challenge. They believed that Earth, though unprepared, could still stand its ground. They were scientists, military strategists, engineers, and everyday people who had no intention of letting fear control them. They gathered in secret, preparing their minds and their hearts for what was to come. They knew that this would not be easy, that the road ahead would be filled with uncertainty and danger. But they also knew that Earth was not as weak as it seemed. For all their lack of preparation, humanity had something the aliens could not predict. Humanity had resolve. And so, in the quiet before the storm, the world held its breath. The peace that had lasted for 3,000 years was about to end, and no one knew what would happen next. The stars, once a symbol of hope and exploration, now seemed to carry with them the weight of a promise that none of Earth's inhabitants could ignore. Something was coming, something beyond their understanding, and they were not ready. But they would have to be, because soon the battle for Earth would begin. The days following the mysterious message felt like a slow descent into chaos. What had once been a calm, serene world was now on the brink of something unthinkable. Governments around the world scrambled to coordinate their responses, but even their most brilliant minds were struggling to understand what was happening. The message, "The peace is over. Prepare for war," repeated in the minds of everyone, from the leaders of nations to the everyday citizens on the streets. But then, on a clear morning, the first sign came. It wasn't a slow build-up or a gradual revelation. No, it was sudden, unexpected, and undeniably real. The sky above Earth darkened, not from storm clouds, but from something far more foreboding. At first, it was just a dot, barely noticeable, hovering in the distance, a flicker in the corner of the sky. But that dot grew larger, and within hours, it became unmistakable. An enormous alien ship, larger than anything the human race had ever imagined, loomed over the planet. Its massive size seemed to warp the very air around it, casting a shadow over cities and landscapes alike. People everywhere stopped in their tracks, staring upward in disbelief. This was no ordinary spacecraft. Its design was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. It seemed both ancient and advanced, as if it had crossed galaxies to reach Earth. The ship moved silently, without any sign of propulsion, and its shape, sleek yet jagged, sent a cold shiver down the spines of all who gazed upon it. It wasn't the kind of thing you saw in movies or read about in books. It was real, and it was coming toward Earth. The world watched in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. There was no time for panic, no time for mass evacuation. It was too late. The ship had arrived, and now humanity had to face whatever came next. As it drew closer, the ship began to emit a low, resonant hum, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air, deep in the bones of everyone who heard it. It was not a voice, but a presence, a sensation that sent waves of anxiety through the global population. Then, without warning, a voice boomed from the skies. It was not a voice that came through speakers or technology. It was a voice that seemed to resonate directly in the minds of those who listened. The words were clear and crisp, and they reverberated in the hearts of all who heard them. "The peace is over. Prepare for war." The message was unmistakable, and the tone was both cold and authoritative. There was no negotiation, no pleasantries. The aliens were not here to speak of peace or cooperation. They had declared war, and they made it clear that they expected humanity to fall in line. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a test. This was an act of aggression, a clear sign that Earth was being targeted. In response, panic set in. People ran into the streets, looking up at the ship with fear in their eyes. Some tried to make sense of it. Others simply stared, speechless. The military immediately went on high alert, and cities began to prepare for an unknown enemy. Yet, despite the panic, there was something else beneath the surface, a strange sense of disbelief. How could this be happening? How could it be real? The peace had lasted so long, and now it seemed as though the universe was about to turn its back on humanity. As the military scrambled to mount a defense, humanity's first instinct was to react with fear. Could Earth fight back? Could humanity hold its own against a force that was so much more advanced? Leaders debated, scientists studied the alien ship's structure, and engineers worked tirelessly to understand its technology. But nothing could prepare them for the reality of what was happening. In a panic, world leaders attempted to send messages of their own, pleas for peace, offers of communication, and desperate requests for understanding. But the aliens responded with nothing but silence. There was no answer, no sign of empathy, and no indication that the aliens had any interest in negotiating. They had come to Earth with one purpose: war. As the world held its breath, waiting for the inevitable conflict to begin, there was one thing that no one could predict: the reaction of humanity itself. In the face of this terrifying threat, there was something deep within the hearts of people that began to stir. It wasn't fear that gripped them. It was something far more complex, something that transcended the terror of the unknown. While the leaders of Earth scrambled to make sense of the situation, the everyday people of the world began to show a different side of themselves. They weren't cowering. They weren't running. They weren't panicking. Instead, they were laughing. It wasn't a laugh of joy or humor, but a laugh of defiance. It was as if humanity, after 3,000 years of peace, had finally reached a breaking point. They were tired of being afraid. They were tired of hiding behind the veil of peace. As the alien ship loomed overhead, casting a shadow on the world below, a strange thing happened. The streets were filled with people who stood tall, with their heads held high, staring up at the skies. Some were smiling, others were laughing. Some even cheered, as though the very presence of the alien ship had sparked a fire within them. The message of war, sent so coldly by the aliens, seemed to have the opposite effect on Earth's people. Instead of cowering, humanity was waking up. In the midst of the fear, there was this unexpected reaction. It was as if humanity had been given a challenge that they were finally ready to meet head-on. The ship above them was a symbol of all that they had feared, but now it was a symbol of something else. It was the moment when humanity would no longer be passive. It was the moment when they would fight back, not with fear, but with unity and strength. Some people stood outside their homes, arms raised to the sky, shouting defiance at the ship above. "We've survived worse," they said. "We'll survive this too." It wasn't the fear or desperation that one might expect from an invasion. It was something else entirely. It was confidence. It was hope. It was a belief that humanity had something the aliens did not understand, an unshakable will to survive, to fight, and to thrive, no matter the odds. As the laughter and cheers echoed through the streets, the message was clear to everyone watching. Humanity wasn't afraid. They were ready to stand tall against whatever came next. The ship in the sky was just the beginning of something far bigger. And though they might not yet know what the aliens had in store for them, the people of Earth were no longer intimidated. They were preparing for war, yes, but not with fear. They were preparing with courage. And as the alien ship hovered above them, humanity's heart began to beat as one. It was a moment of strange unity, a moment where the world realized something very important. If the aliens were here to conquer Earth, they were going to have to fight for it. And this time, humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. The first attack came as a sudden, violent shock to the world. No one had anticipated that the aliens would strike so quickly or with such force. The skies above Earth had been quiet after the message, but that tranquility was shattered when the alien ship suddenly released a barrage of energy pulses. Bright flashes of light tore through the air as the first wave of destruction began. The beams shot from the ship's enormous cannons, striking cities with devastating power. The first target was New York City, a symbol of humanity's strength and unity. Buildings were reduced to rubble in seconds, crumbling under the immense force of the alien assault. The once bustling streets were turned into a chaotic nightmare as people scrambled for shelter. The world watched in horror as the alien ship unleashed its fury. There was no warning, no negotiation, just pure, unrelenting destruction. Across the globe, the alien attacks spread like wildfire. Tokyo, London, Paris, and Sydney all came under assault. The alien ships had multiple forms of attack: massive energy beams, missiles that exploded with the force of small nuclear bombs, and strange, alien machines that dropped from the ships to wreak havoc on the ground. Entire cities were torn apart in the blink of an eye, their once proud skylines reduced to ash and dust. The global defense systems, though advanced after years of peace, were no match for the alien technology. The military was thrown into disarray, scrambling to respond to an enemy they barely understood. Satellites and advanced radars could not track the alien ships as they moved too fast and too unpredictably. Humanity's weapons, designed to protect from natural disasters or minor conflicts, proved useless against the overwhelming might of the invaders. In the face of all this chaos, humanity did what it had done for centuries: adapted. While the major cities were under attack, smaller pockets of resistance began to form. Civilians, soldiers, scientists, and engineers all over the world began to put their minds together, realizing that the only chance they had was to fight back, quickly, creatively, and without hesitation. In a hidden bunker beneath the streets of London, a group of military strategists and engineers worked furiously, analyzing the alien attacks. "We need to hit them back." "But how?" one of the engineers asked, his voice filled with desperation. "They're too strong, too fast." Another scientist, a woman who had spent years studying space technology, raised her hand. "What if we use their own energy against them?" she suggested. "The energy blasts. They're powerful, but they're not perfect. We can find a way to harness their frequency, reverse the polarity, and make it work for us." The idea was risky. It was untested. But they had no other choice. Humanity's greatest weapon against the alien assault was their ingenuity, their ability to think outside the box and to work together. So they began to work, combining their knowledge of Earth's technology with the strange alien technology they had gathered from the wreckage. They developed a series of electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disrupt the energy beams coming from the alien ships. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Meanwhile, in the streets, people were beginning to fight back in whatever way they could. Some used makeshift weapons, others relied on their knowledge of the city to navigate the ruins and survive. Soldiers, who had once trained for small-scale conflicts, were now facing an enemy unlike any they had ever imagined. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, there was a fierce resolve in their eyes. They weren't going to let their world fall without a fight. As the days went on, the alien ships continued to destroy cities. The world was in chaos. The global economy had collapsed. Communications were severed, and the death toll climbed higher with each passing hour. The once peaceful Earth was now a battleground. In the midst of all this destruction, however, a strange thing began to happen. Amid the rubble and the chaos, humanity's spirit began to shine through. People from all walks of life, farmers, doctors, engineers, teachers, even children, joined forces in ways no one could have predicted. They built shelters out of the wreckage, shared supplies, and stood side by side, knowing that this was their only chance for survival. The bond that had once united humanity in peace was now uniting them in their fight for survival. In every major city, a resistance movement began to form. Citizens who had once lived separate lives, disconnected by borders and nations, now saw themselves as one people, a united force against an alien enemy. They began to organize, setting up secret communication networks, sharing information, and strategizing counterattacks. It was a strange kind of unity, born from necessity, but it was powerful. The world watched as the first signs of resistance began to emerge. In New York, a group of survivors managed to intercept one of the alien ships. Using their knowledge of the city's underground infrastructure, they launched a surprise attack, knocking the ship off course and sending it crashing into the river. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. It showed the world that the aliens were not invincible. Humanity could still fight back. That moment sparked something. Across the globe, in cities and towns ravaged by the alien assault, people began to fight back in their own ways. They hacked into the alien systems, sabotaged their machines, and disrupted their communications. They had no advanced weapons, no superhuman strength, but they had something even more powerful: determination. The alien invaders, for all their technology and superiority, had underestimated humanity's resilience. They had assumed that Earth would fall quickly, that the people would crumble under the weight of their assault. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, is that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their ability to stand together when faced with the impossible. As the resistance grew, so did the hope. The world may have been on the brink of collapse, but humanity was not giving up. The fight was far from over, and though the alien ships continued to devastate Earth, there was a new fire burning within the hearts of its people. This fire would not be extinguished easily. The first battle had been a devastating one, but it was far from the last. The aliens had attacked with overwhelming force, but they had failed to break humanity's spirit. And now, humanity was prepared to strike back, not with the power of technology or brute force, but with the power of their will to survive. It was just the beginning of a fight that would determine the future of Earth. The tides of war had begun to turn, but the journey was far from over. The alien invaders, despite their overwhelming technology and initial success, had underestimated the resilience of humanity. The first victory, however small, had reignited hope across the globe. People who had been paralyzed by fear were now finding strength in the face of adversity. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters. In every corner of the world, resistance movements grew in strength. The once scattered pockets of resistance had formed into organized forces. Using guerrilla tactics, civilians, soldiers, and scientists worked together to strike at the alien forces with everything they had. They sabotaged alien supply lines, destroyed energy relays, and targeted weak points in the invaders' technology. The alien ships, while formidable, were not invincible. The more humanity learned about them, the more they adapted, evolving their methods and strategies with each victory, no matter how small. The alien invaders, now faced with unexpected resistance, began to change their tactics. They had expected to crush humanity swiftly, but the humans were far more resourceful than they had predicted. The alien forces began to escalate their attacks, hitting more cities, more vital infrastructure, in an attempt to break the will of Earth's people. The destruction they wrought was brutal. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, and the death toll grew ever higher. But as the Earth burned, something remarkable happened. Instead of weakening, humanity's resolve only strengthened. In the midst of this chaos, a crucial development took place. Scientists had discovered something unexpected in the wreckage of the alien technology they had captured. A key weakness in their energy shields. The shields that had once seemed impenetrable could be breached if they could reverse engineer the technology. It was a breakthrough, one that could change the course of the war. But it would take time, and time was running out. Across the world, people came together like never before. Nations, once divided by borders and politics, put aside their differences. The human race, united in its struggle for survival, forged alliances that had once seemed impossible. Together, they pooled their resources, scientific, technological, and human, to create weapons capable of fighting back against the alien invasion. The resistance became a global effort, with every person contributing in some way, no matter how small. In the heart of the underground bunkers where the resistance leaders met, plans were drawn up for a final, all-out assault. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was humanity's only chance. If they could get close enough to one of the alien motherships, they could use the technology they had learned to disable the ship's shields and target their power cores. But the alien ships were heavily guarded, and getting close would mean facing their full might. Yet, despite the risks, the plan was put into motion. The first strike came in the dead of night. A team of elite soldiers and resistance fighters, armed with advanced electromagnetic pulse devices and experimental weapons, infiltrated an alien base on the outskirts of what had once been Paris. Their goal was simple: plant explosives near the alien power source and disable the shield long enough to allow a full-scale assault. The mission was a high-risk operation. If they failed, the destruction could be catastrophic. But as they neared their objective, the humans were filled with a singular, powerful emotion: hope. For the first time in months, there was a sense that they might actually succeed. They had faced so much loss, so much pain, but now there was something new, a fire that burned in their hearts. The mission was dangerous, but they fought for more than just survival. They fought for their homes, their families, their future, and they fought for something that no alien invader could ever take away: their unity. The mission unfolded with terrifying speed. Soldiers moved swiftly, navigating the crumbled streets and destroyed buildings. They worked in silence, their movements precise. Time was their enemy, but there was no room for hesitation. Every moment they wasted gave the aliens a chance to reinforce their defenses. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. As the resistance fighters reached the alien power source, they planted the explosives and activated their EMP devices. The first wave of power surged through the alien base, disrupting its shields. For a brief moment, the aliens were vulnerable. It was a chance that had never come before, and they seized it. A blast rang out as the explosives detonated, taking down the power core and causing a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the alien base. The explosion was so powerful that it could be seen from miles away, a fiery beacon that signaled a new beginning for the human resistance. The alien forces scrambled to regroup, but the humans had gained the upper hand. The shield that had once protected the motherships was now gone. Across the world, resistance movements launched coordinated attacks, striking at the alien ships with everything they had. The sudden vulnerability of the alien fleet gave humanity the chance it had desperately needed. The battle raged on, with the skies above Earth now filled with the sounds of warfare. The once invincible alien forces were now on the defensive. Humanity's adaptability, creativity, and resolve had turned the tide of the war. In the midst of the battle, there was still a sense of uncertainty. The war was far from over, and the cost had been high. Cities lay in ruins, and millions had perished in the conflict. But in the faces of the people who fought, there was something new. It wasn't fear. It was defiance. It was the belief that they could win, that they would win. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to come together in the face of the impossible. And now, more than ever, it was clear that no matter the odds, humanity would never give up. As the final offensive began, the alien ships, once so confident in their superiority, began to fall. One by one, they were destroyed, their once imposing presence reduced to nothing more than burning wreckage. The world watched in awe as Earth's defenders made their final stand. The people of Earth had fought back with everything they had, and now victory was within their grasp. The final battle would come soon. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity was not fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for victory. And they knew that this time, they would not lose. The final battle had arrived, and the Earth stood on the precipice of an uncertain future. The alien forces, once so overwhelming in their strength and technology, were now scrambling, desperate to hold on to their grip on the planet. Their ships, once unassailable, now fell one by one as humanity's most daring fighters, armed with their own ingenious technology, pushed forward. The fight for Earth had reached its climax. In the heart of the Resistance Command Center, leaders from every corner of the globe gathered. Nations, once divided by politics and borders, were now united as one, bound together by a single purpose: to rid their world of the alien threat once and for all. As plans were drawn and strategies were set in motion, there was an undeniable sense of resolve. Humanity had already overcome so much. They had lost cities, loved ones, and countless resources, but they had gained something infinitely more valuable: unity. Together, they were stronger than ever. The battle lines were drawn. A final assault would be launched on the remaining motherships, and this time, humanity would strike with everything they had. The alien forces had underestimated Earth's capacity for resistance, and now they would pay the price. The humans were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for their future, their children, their way of life. This battle would decide everything. The first phase of the assault began at dawn, as a coalition of military forces, engineers, and scientists launched their final attack. The skies above Earth were filled with a strange new energy. Humanity had developed an array of weapons designed specifically to exploit the aliens' weaknesses. The electromagnetic pulses that had disrupted the alien technology earlier in the war were now more refined and far more powerful. Their power surged through the air, crackling with electricity, as ships took to the sky with unprecedented force. It wasn't just a fight of firepower, it was a fight of will, of defiance against an enemy that had underestimated Earth's greatest strength: its people. Across the globe, the skies were ablaze with combat. The alien motherships, now vulnerable without their protective shields, were relentlessly targeted by human forces. Each explosion, each strike, sent ripples of hope through the hearts of humanity. Earth's people were no longer fighting in fear. They were fighting with the confidence of victory. On the ground, soldiers, civilians, and resistance fighters fought side by side, their movements synchronized in a well-coordinated effort to push the aliens off their land. There were no boundaries now, no divisions. The battle raged in cities, in fields, and on the edges of every human settlement. Alien machines, once unstoppable, were now falling in droves as humanity's tenacity overwhelmed their advanced technology. The forces of Earth fought with a singular purpose: to reclaim their world. Among the chaos, a small group of elite resistance fighters infiltrated the alien mothership. These brave men and women had become the heart of humanity's final push. Their mission was simple yet perilous: plant the final explosive devices in the heart of the alien fleet's command center. If they succeeded, the alien invasion would be over. If they failed, Earth would fall. The journey into the alien mothership was treacherous. The ship's interior was unlike anything humans had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and the air was thick with an alien presence. The resistance fighters navigated through the strange, labyrinthine corridors, avoiding detection from the alien patrols and fighting off drones that emerged from the ship's dark corners. Every step they took felt heavier, the weight of the mission pressing on them. Yet, in their hearts, they knew the truth. There was no turning back. They had come this far, and there was no other option. As they reached the core of the ship, the leader of the group, a seasoned fighter named Captain Daniels, made a final solemn vow. "We either end this, or we don't leave this place alive," he said to his team. His voice was steady, filled with the cold resolve of someone who had seen the worst and refused to let fear dictate the outcome. They placed the explosives deep within the alien command center. The alien machines, which had once felt so overpowering, seemed to falter in their presence. Perhaps for the first time, the invaders felt the weight of humanity's resolve. The resistance fighters set the timer, their fingers trembling, not from fear, but from the immense responsibility they carried. As the countdown began, they'd made their way to the exit. The battle outside was growing more intense, and the fate of the world was in their hands. With seconds ticking away, the last resistance fighter barely made it out of the ship before the explosion rocked the skies. The shockwave sent ripples across the atmosphere, tearing through the alien fleet, and the mothership's massive structure began to crumble. The ship, a symbol of alien invincibility, was now nothing more than a burning husk. The alien forces, once so confident in their superiority, were left vulnerable and disorganized. The tide of the war had shifted irreversibly. As the alien mothership crashed into the Earth's atmosphere, fiery debris scattered across the sky. The world below erupted in celebration. People cheered, their cries echoing through the cities that had endured so much. Humanity had won, not just because of technology or superior weapons, but because they had something no alien force could understand, a spirit that refused to be broken. With the destruction of the mothership, the remaining alien forces began to retreat. The few ships that remained were now easy targets, and humanity's final assault finished what had already been started. The invaders were vanquished. Earth had stood its ground. In the aftermath of the battle, the world stood on the brink of a new era. The skies cleared, and the sun began to shine once more over the devastated cities. But this time, the world was united. There was no longer any room for division. Humanity had been tested like never before, and it had passed, not by avoiding fear, but by embracing it and fighting through it. Captain Daniels, the leader of the final mission, stood with his team in the midst of the wreckage. Their clothes were tattered, their faces smeared with ash and blood, but they stood tall. They had done the impossible. Earth had survived. "We've done it," Captain Daniels said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've won. This world, our world, is still ours, and we're going to rebuild it, together." The words echoed in the hearts of all who heard them. Humanity had been brought to the edge of extinction, but they had not faltered. They had fought with everything they had, and in the end, it was that indomitable spirit that had carried them through. As the resistance fighters looked toward the horizon, there was a sense of peace. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. Rebuilding would take time, but they knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, humanity would stand together. Earth was theirs, and they would protect it, no matter the cost. The aliens had come to conquer, but humanity had shown them that Earth was not a world to be easily defeated. It was a world that could rise from the ashes, stronger than ever, because the people who called it home were unyielding in their will to survive, and they would never give up the fight. The war was over, but Earth had been irrevocably changed. The sky was clear, and the sound of explosions and gunfire that had once echoed through the cities was now replaced by silence. A silence that, while peaceful, carried with it the weight of everything that had been lost. The streets, once bustling with life and energy, were now a testament to the destruction that had nearly wiped out humanity. Yet, amidst the ruins, there was something else, something that was impossible to ignore. Hope. Humanity had done the unimaginable. They had stood firm in the face of an enemy that had wiped out entire civilizations. They had been pushed to the brink, yet they had found a way to fight back, not just with technology, but with their will to survive. The world was scared, but it was not defeated, and as the sun began to rise on the dawn of a new era, Earth's people began to rebuild. In the days following the final battle, the global community came together in a way that had never been seen before. The world's governments, once divided by politics, race, and resources, now stood united. With the alien threat eradicated, there were no more borders. People from all nations, cultures, and backgrounds set aside their differences, working together to rebuild the world they had almost lost. The devastation had been immense, but there was a renewed sense of purpose. The scars of war would always remain, but so would the strength humanity had discovered within itself. The remnants of the alien technology were studied carefully by the world's brightest minds. The knowledge they had gained from the invaders' weapons, ships, and technology was invaluable. What had once been a source of destruction was now the key to humanity's future. Governments and research groups scrambled to reverse engineer the technology, using it to rebuild infrastructure, restore communications, and create new energy sources. The alien technology wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool, one that could propel Earth into a new age of progress. The rebuilding process was not easy. The destruction left in the wake of the alien attack was vast. Entire cities had been obliterated, and the economies of nations were in shambles. Yet there was a collective drive to rebuild. People who had lost everything, homes, families, friends, found strength in one another. There was no time to mourn in isolation. The world was in the process of healing, and it would take everyone working together to make that happen. In the heart of what had once been New York City, a memorial was erected to honor the fallen. It wasn't just for the soldiers who had given their lives on the front lines, or the civilians who had perished in the cities. It was a memorial to humanity as a whole, a symbol of their resilience, their unity, and their victory. The plaque read, "In honor of those who fought and those who never gave up." Meanwhile, world leaders convened to discuss the future of Earth. They understood that the alien war had not only brought humanity together, it had forced them to recognize their shared destiny. There would be no more wars between nations. The battle for Earth had been won, and humanity could not afford to squander the unity they had fought so hard to achieve. It was time for the world to look forward, to heal and grow, as one. Among the most remarkable of the changes was the realization that humanity, despite all its flaws, was capable of achieving incredible things when united. The war against the aliens had not only shown them the lengths they could go to survive, but also the depth of their compassion and cooperation. People who had once fought each other for resources, land, or power now shared their knowledge, their skills, and their hopes for a better world. The destruction had brought out the best in humanity, proving that even in the darkest times, the light of the human spirit could not be extinguished. 1 year after the final battle, a massive global summit was held. It wasn't just a conference, it was a celebration of survival, of progress, and of the new world humanity had built together. Leaders from every nation spoke about the future, about the work that still needed to be done, and the goals they would achieve, not alone, but as a united species. The message was clear. Humanity had learned its lesson. No longer would Earth be divided by petty disputes. No longer would its people fight among themselves. The war had been won, but the true victory lay in the new world they were building. Among the many speakers was Captain Daniels, the leader of the final mission that had destroyed the alien mothership. Though the war was over, he hadn't let the newfound peace lull him into complacency. He stood before a crowd of survivors and leaders, his face weathered but his eyes filled with hope. "We've done the impossible," he said, his voice carrying through the stadium. "We've fought an enemy that thought we were weak. They thought we were fractured, but we proved them wrong. We proved that we are stronger together, and that no matter how dark the world may get, we will rise. We are not just survivors. We are the future of this planet, and we will protect it for ourselves, for our children, and for the generations that will follow." The crowd erupted in applause. There was no doubt now. Humanity had earned its place in the stars. The aliens had come to Earth thinking they could conquer it. Instead, they had awakened something far more powerful, a people determined to survive, to thrive, and to never give up. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when all its people came together. As the summit ended and the leaders returned to their countries to continue their work, a new age began. Earth had been saved, not just from the aliens, but from its own divisions. It was a new world, one of cooperation, unity, and hope. The future was uncertain, but humanity had proven that it was capable of anything. The scars of the past would always remain, but so would the strength that had been forged in the fires of war. And as the people of Earth looked toward the stars, they knew that they had not just defeated an alien invasion, they had secured their place in the universe. The world was theirs, and they would protect it forever. The Earth had changed. The scars of war were still fresh, but in the hearts of humanity, there was something new, a sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be human. The days of division, of fighting among themselves, were over. The war had taught them harsh lessons, but also valuable ones. They had learned that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about unity. The world that had once been on the brink of annihilation was now on the path to recovery, to rebirth. In the years following the war, the planet slowly but steadily began to heal. The alien invasion had left Earth scared, but it had also left something else, a newfound resilience that could never be erased. Cities were rebuilt, forests regrew, and the people of Earth worked tirelessly to repair the damage that had been done. It wasn't easy. There were still countless challenges to face, but Earth's greatest weapon was its people. The human spirit, unyielding and unbroken, had proven itself to be far stronger than any alien force could have ever imagined. As the recovery efforts continued, a new generation of leaders emerged. These leaders were different from the ones who had led before. They had witnessed firsthand the destruction that division could bring, and they were determined to never repeat the mistakes of the past. They knew that the true strength of humanity lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its ability to come together and fight for something greater than itself. The era of conflict between nations was over. No longer would borders and ideologies divide them. The focus now was on the future, on rebuilding, on peace, and on creating a better world for the generations to come. One of the most significant changes was the establishment of the Earth Unity Coalition, EUC, an organization formed to ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The EUC was composed of representatives from every nation, every culture, and every corner of the globe. Their mission was clear: to ensure that the resources of the planet were shared equitably, that the environment was protected, and that the legacy of the war would not be a future of division, but one of cooperation. The EUC worked with the scientific community to unlock the full potential of the alien technology they had recovered. They didn't just use it for military purposes, they turned it into a tool for peace. The advanced energy sources, the medical technologies, the communication systems, they were all adapted and used to improve the quality of life for everyone on Earth. It was an era of unparalleled progress. New cities were built with sustainability in mind, powered by clean energy derived from the very technology that had once been used to destroy them. Humanity was now capable of achieving things they had only dreamed of before. But it wasn't just about technology. The true power of the post-war world lay in the relationships between people. Earth had been through an unimaginable trial, but now it was emerging stronger, more connected. People were no longer focused on the differences that once separated them. They had come to understand that it was their shared humanity that made them strong. Across the world, people came together to celebrate their survival, to honor the lives that had been lost, and to reaffirm their commitment to never again allowing such a war to tear them apart. Monuments were erected not just to commemorate the fallen soldiers or the destruction of alien ships, but to honor the collective spirit of humanity. The message was simple: we are one. We are united. In the years following the invasion, Earth began to explore new frontiers. Space exploration, once limited to only a few powerful nations, became a global endeavor. The technological advancements gained from the alien ships propelled humanity beyond the stars. Earth had learned from its enemies, and now it was ready to venture into the unknown, not as isolated nations, but as a unified species. It wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. It was about exploring new worlds, making peace with others who might inhabit them, and sharing the lessons they had learned. The journey into space was not only a matter of survival, but also of discovery and growth. The story of the war became a legend, passed down from one generation to the next. It was told in schools, in books, and in movies. But it wasn't just a story of victory. It was a story of what could happen when people came together. It was a reminder of the cost of division and the immeasurable value of unity. It was a story of survival, of loss, of pain, and ultimately, of hope. And so, as the decades passed, the Earth that had once stood on the brink of extinction flourished. It wasn't a perfect world. No world ever was. But it was a world that had learned from its past, that had learned to rise from its ashes, and that had learned the most important lesson of all, that together, humanity could overcome anything. The universe beyond Earth remained vast, mysterious, and unknown. There were still threats out there, forces that might one day challenge the peace humanity had fought so hard to secure. But Earth was no longer afraid. Humanity had learned how to fight, not just with weapons, but with the strength of unity, with courage, and with an unshakable belief in its ability to endure. The stars were within reach, and humanity, once fragmented and weak, was now united and strong. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Earth would never face such a challenge again alone. And if the universe sent any more invaders, they would soon learn what the aliens had already discovered. Humans would never surrender. Earth would fight, and Earth would win.